Hello, everyone. Welcome to our People Strategy Forum. We'll be starting in about 5 minutes.
So yeah, but anyway, I was looking at a few stats and just preparing for today's call. And the one that came out from Gallup recently about highly engaged teams, showing that there's a 21% greater profitability. So that's pretty
Absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting as employers really look at how do you re-engage when you spent so much time at home, you've been on lockdown, helping your kids with school. Our minds are not all about our work right now, and it's like shifting gears. That's kind of tough,
Yeah.
Either working in person or virtual,
I know. Well, just things are just getting so extended. It's like we at the beginning of all of this, when the pandemic started, it was like, okay, well, it'll take us through flu season or whatever. It'll start waning off towards the summer, and here we are. We've a lot of states and counties have gone over the hump, but then we're looking at perhaps a second wave early on, and we don't. And the mere fact is that companies can't afford to stay closed forever. We got to figure out something.
Well, I just was doing some research for a post on LinkedIn about this subject, and saw a forum, and I think it was in Fast Company, about the list of companies that are putting forth their reopen dates. And it was interesting that both Google and Facebook have delayed any return to physical work site until 2021.
Oh yeah.
That's great. That's great that they can do that.
And it's a long list of, those are just the household word names, but a long list of companies that have either said you can work from home permanently, right? Like, Twitter and is it Facebook? No. Facebook was just delaying until 2021. One of them is permanent work from home. You can work from home forever.
Well, in my view, the small businesses are in a challenging position because they're trying to do that, and then trying to create virtual opportunities. I think the public is being more accepting of virtual business, so that small businesses can sell their crafts or sell their clothing line or whatever it is. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of small businesses go out of business though during this stage.
Well, yeah,
able to adapt to the virtual environment.
Just thinking of some of the restaurants that have to kind of half open, where they have to spread people out. Basically their rent or their cost per square foot is double what it is before. It's hitting they already have thin margins, in that industry.
So. Yeah, I was talking to a GM, and he had said that the margins are anywhere from it's either 3 to 6% or 3 to 9%, and that's it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know how restaurants are going to be able to sustain themselves with 50% capacity. It's frightening.
Very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And it's similar in the airline industry as well. So one of the proposals floating around in India is that we'll keep the middle seat vacant and practice social distancing on an aircraft. And airlines have said, no, we absolutely refuse to fly because our margins are going to be hit very severely. And we're a growing market. So as it is, prices are low, airlines are bleeding already. And it's a tough scenario for everyone.
I was reading on the airline part an article about the future of airline industry, 3 experts that were interviewed on it. And a lot of it is speaking to the fact that, the bailouts, they sort of know that those are coming, and that's their entitlement or whatever. And a lot of argument back about how we're going to create reform in the airline industry around clean energy, that it's a real opportunity at this time to sort of turn away from the existing very heavy carbon cost, and that there's laws that they cannot actually be taxed on those carbon emissions. So it'll be interesting to see if there could be some reform around that. I think a lot of businesses are going to be like, we don't need to send our salespeople.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Lisa. Welcome, everyone. And welcome to our People Strategy Forum. We're so pleased to have you back. And if you're new, we're super glad to have you. I am happy to have my team here. My name is Shar Miller. I am a company owner and a chief HR officer, as well as a talent strategist. And I also do career coaching. And then I'm pleased to have Sam Reeve, who's the CEO of CompTeam and has been just awesome at hosting all of these events. And my colleague, Lisa Jackson, who's a culture change strategist. So pleased that she's part of our great forums here. We're just so happy to have you guys and join us today. So we have some great topics to go over today. We have some guests today, and I'm very happy to have Sumit Singla, and he is going to join us today to talk about high-performing cohesive teams, and he will be discussing that with Lisa Jackson. And then I'm very pleased to have back one of our esteemed first speakers from our first HR forum, Erin Greilick. Dr. Erin Greilick, she's awesome. Thank you, Erin. She's back with us, and that's exciting because she did our very first presentation, I think it was at the end of March. So today's discussion is extremely interactive. We want to engage. This is a forum type of setting. And just before I get kicked off with our speaker today, just wanted to mention that we highly encourage you to participate in the chat or the Q&A. Our team is watching the conversation, and we would like this to be very interactive. And so please ask questions if there's particular topics that you're interested in discussing, or if you want to share a sample or a story, please engage in that. Also, just before we get started, this is found on compteam.net. So all of our recordings from today's session will be within the next 48 hours. Also, recordings of all of our prior sessions are saved out there. So we highly encourage you to listen to those, learn, and perhaps share with your colleagues, other business owners, other HR related OD professionals, etc. These are free, and we will have these every week, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. So Mountain Time. So please share those. And again, at the end of our session, we encourage you to connect with us on LinkedIn and look at our articles. We have a ton of free tools and resources as well. So without further ado, I'd like to kick it off to our team, Sumit Singla and Lisa Jackson, who are going to be talking about high-performing cohesive teams.
Great. And Sumit, I'm going to go ahead and you can go ahead and share your screen.
Sure, Sam. Thank you. All right. While it's coming up, just a little bit of an introduction. Thank you, Shar, for introducing the forum and for introducing us. I hope my screen is visible and audible as well.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Perfect. Great. So without any ado, I'll start off with what we are talking about here today. We're talking about a very, very problematic scenario, which is team disengagement. And how do we go around solving for it and building stronger cohesive teams? Team disengagement is a major issue. It's a drain on financial resources. It's a drain on energy. It's a problem that's faced by every single company worldwide. And for those of you who've either been disengaged or faced disengaged people, the biggest issue is people have bad moods, and nobody really likes to face grumpy people around, whether it's at home, it's at the workplace, and it can just be annoying and extremely tiring to wake up fresh and energetic on a Monday morning and get to see some really, really annoyed and grumpy people around. Of course, a disengaged team has significantly reduced productivity. People are nowhere as productive as they should be. The efficiency, the effectiveness of a team takes a major hit. Disengaged people tend to suffer from poor mental health. So this is not a universal statement. It's not to say every single disengaged person can have or will have poor mental health, but there is a correlation between the two. Um, Work quality tends to suffer. You start getting more escalations. You start getting poor feedback from different clients. Um, there are regular fights with friends, family members, and even colleagues, and um some of them can be really nasty. Um Interestingly, there's correlation between higher alcohol consumption and team disengagement. So maybe it would be a good idea for organizations to not only do those engagement surveys, start looking at how much alcohol are you drinking. So it could be a sign of how disengaged you are at work.
Yeah. One thing that I read recently, Sumit, is that well, of course, we had engagement was and productivity was actually increasing when when we entered into the pandemic. I mean, a lot of the knowledge workers are actually producing more. But now that we've got into the social unrest and the riots and so forth, it's been more distracting, actually hurting productivity and engagement. So have you seen that in other parts of the globe?
So productivity, of course, is a big challenge everywhere, Sam, and that's a great point. Thank you for bringing it up. The interesting thing is that during the pandemic, team engagement has gone up significantly. So more than 88% firms, and I think we might just be referring to the same article. Uh, More than 88% firms report that they've seen an increase in employee engagement, and my hypothesis is that because more and more people are talking about what do employees want, what are their needs, and how they're struggling even outside of work in the current scenario, and trying to solve for it. So uh, maybe there haven't been as many companies, as many people talking about team engagement or employee engagement as are talking right now. So maybe if we can carry this on even after the pandemic, maybe engagement scores will hit unprecedented levels as well. So maybe some good will come out of the pandemic situation for engagement.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Sumit, that the team part of it is, and that's something that I've been seeing as well, that individually people seem to be having an easier time being productive and higher performing with the virtual work. You know, a lot of it's citing, I don't have to get up, put on my face, drive to work, the commute time, right? But that the team itself is, I have seen exactly what you're talking about whether there's just like a lack of experience, as I was posing on the chat, with how you actually lead effective team meetings in a remote setting, or what that's about. But that I think that is a correlation for sure. It's individually we're doing better, team wise maybe not.
Definitely. And what I'd like to highlight here is who's responsible. So if you're disengaged, if your people are disengaged, who exactly is at fault here, and who are the responsible parties? So if you're a team leader, if you're a team manager, um, you are directly responsible. More than 70% people say that managers need to do more in order to engage them, and employees are just not happy with how managers have been engaging them. They've got major issues with not feeling recognized and not feeling that their contributions at work are being respected and valued by managers and by other teammates as well. And people are also saying they're not being managed well. So the interesting thing here, Lisa, is that there's nothing here which is the tangible part of it. So people are not saying, pay me a higher salary, promote me faster. Uh, the organization's brand is not something I'm very happy with. So the conventional drivers of engagement is not what people are commenting about. So people are saying, I don't feel valued, respected, recognized. I'm not being managed well. And a huge 54% people are saying, I do this job only because I get paid. I've got thousands of bills and mortgages to take care of. And that's what one of the books on a magnetic culture refers to as the working dead. Unfortunately, there's no AMC TV show on this, but um,
Yet.
these people are the ones who are who are just turning up, occupying those seats and heading back home without really contributing, um, because the bills are getting paid.
Right.
Yeah, one other thing I just I was talking about the stat ahead of time of before this we started here today, and it was by Gallup, and of course we've all heard about how important our engagement is in our employees, and it can actually impact profitability. So there's the statistics saying is that those companies with highly engaged workers are 21% more profitable than the mean. So it's very important to work on this, and how do we find ways to re-engage our employees in this remote environment during this times of turmoil and uncertainty in the future. So it's really important for us to crack this nut.
Oh, absolutely. And we need to find a cure for this sooner rather than later, before all of our talented people have left for other organizations and are trying to find better opportunities in the current scenario. The great thing here is that leaders who are emotionally intelligent, they already know this. Unfortunately, at least in the political spectrum of things, we don't see a lot of people who have good emotional intelligence or even a high IQ. But for an organization, a leader with high EQ or EI is absolutely crucial. What these leaders bring to the table is they're self-aware and they're self-regulating. So what this means is they know what their strengths and their shortcomings are, and they're able to function well and regulate their own behavior, regulate the way they interact with people to bring out the best in them. They're motivators, able to nurture the best of performance from them. And they've got a lot of empathy and social skills. So they're able to build lasting bonds with people, and they're not simply minions doing the dirty work and achieving some objectives for them. So that's what great leaders do. And we see a lot of them, a lot of these highly engaging personalities in fields like sports. And typically you would find a sports team with a great coach or a great captain performing much better than the rest. And maybe the percentage there is even higher than 21%, Sam, for teams that are on the sports arena, because the team, I mean, it's a two-way exercise there, where the leader and the team, they both know that unless they function as a cohesive, tight unit, they're not going to win anything. So individual contribution doesn't matter if the team loses.
Yeah, and I think that, I'm sorry, Sumit, I think that the one thing about this, that these qualities that you're speaking about with emotional intelligence that I want to point out is that those qualities are trained and developed in companies from the supervisory level on up, and that it isn't just something that, I mean, many of us maybe arrive to the workplace with some of these, but a lot of what we're seeing with the disengagement problem is a leadership problem, that you don't have leaders who are stimulating and drawing out those qualities. And that is it's a trained skill set. It doesn't happen just by people showing up with them, because the organization has to recognize and promote people for them.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point, Lisa.
And remove people from leadership who don't demonstrate them. And I think in my culture work, that has been one of the hardest sides of the equation, right? Is that we can say, oh yeah, you know, we're putting people through these programs, but you know, to learn empathy, to learn the social skills of leadership, but they don't remove the 2 or 3 people who are pulling exactly in the opposite direction from that. And it really invalidates a lot of the work that's being done to create these type of leadership environments.
Yeah. So one thing on that, on Lisa, I mean, it's so important to make sure that we show an empathy, especially in situations like this, when we have, you know, racial unrest, we have the pandemic and so forth. We need to make sure that we're listening and hearing people and communicating effectively. But for those managers, in your experience, for those managers that are causing or don't have this skill set that's developed well enough, I mean, how should businesses think about, if they can't if they can't ramp this person up within a specific amount of time, should they be thinking about succession, moving that person out into a different role? What is your experience there?
Yeah, that's exactly it. That there are companies, and we've talked about this in a form or two ago, that are experimenting with different tracks for people who are really high performers but aren't necessarily the best leaders. And so, having the opportunity to grow your pay, grow your influence, grow the amount of contribution that you can make doesn't always mean managing a team or managing people. And that is a very specific kind of skill set that not everyone is cut out for. I decided early in my career that I wasn't cut out for it, that is something where the empathy piece is huge, that really being oriented toward other rather than towards self. And so much of the time, I think leaders are promoted in organizations because they're the strongest, most charismatic personality.
Agreed. And unfortunately, we still hear a lot of leaders saying, I couldn't care less about being nicer to people. I'm here to do a job and I'm not paid to be nice to you. Therefore, just take it on the chin and move on. And I've got a fairly strong opinion that such leaders don't belong in their places at all. And even now, specifically with the COVID scenario, I do have clients, I do know people who are actually trying to push their teammates to step out of home and saying, if I can go meet a client, why can't you? I mean, all this lockdown, all this this entire scenario of stay at home, stay safe, it's all nonsense. It's not that the virus is just sitting there to attack you and me. And I think that's one of the most horrible things people can say. And such leaders have absolutely no place in their positions as far as I'm concerned.
Well said, right.
But yeah, moving on from that point. So these leaders, the emotionally intelligent leaders, the ones who are smart enough to know how to get the best performance from their teams, they look for team players on the team. So they don't really look for top talent, and they don't try to build a team of all stars, because they know it's important to get people for the right roles, to get people with the right skills. And one of my favorite movies, which is set during the Cold War era, when the US and the Soviet tensions were at their peak. There's a coach, he's trying to build an ice hockey team, and he deliberately doesn't pick the all-stars. So he gets a team together and he tells them up front, and I absolutely love that quote. He says, gentlemen, you don't have enough talent to win on talent alone. So he's trying to get them to gel as a team, to put their differences aside and start working together. And when they're not doing it and they're trying to individually show off, he says that eventually, of course, manages to bind them together. But that's the sign of a strong leader. That's the sign of an intelligent leader looking for team players, looking for people who can perform specific roles. Obviously, you can't have a team that only has quarterbacks, or where everyone believes they're a quarterback. Definite recipe for failure, right?
Absolutely. I've been working with a lot of startups and small companies lately, especially through this pandemic cycle, helping them ramp up and keeping them going. And when they're looking at hiring talent, they're more interested in the right behaviors than the right skill sets and so forth. Of course, they find somebody that's willing to learn and want to ramp up, but behavior and being able to work together as a team and pulling people and having that strong emotional intelligence is what these small companies are looking for to ensure that they have cohesiveness.
Absolutely. So that's the trait of a leader, and leaders focus on creating the right climate. So it's not only one inspirational quote that a leader offers and then disappears. It's an ongoing thing. The right climate, it can't be developed overnight. You can't suddenly say that from tomorrow, because I watched a great sports movie, I'm going to replicate that culture. So it's got to be a sustained process. It's got to be an ongoing effort. The first one you've got different voices in your team, hear them. Tell people they're not isolated, tell people they're included, put aside differences in age, gender, race, physical ability or disability, and even the latest inclusion parameter is neuro inclusion. So people with um, let's say people who are on the autism spectrum, including them into the workforce as well. So irrespective of where a person is from or who they are, make sure they're not isolated, make sure their voice is not getting shut out. Create a culture of inclusion. And diversity is something a lot of organizations do focus on, getting the numbers and percentages in place. But if you're getting people from diverse backgrounds together and then not providing them a voice, you're actually not building inclusion. You'll end up even destroying diversity. So a great leader would definitely focus on the inclusion element. They would try and bring in clarity and a direction to work in. So things are bound to be chaotic for some reason or the other, and there are some uncertainties that will always arise, but a great leader will ensure that they try and lead the team through it. And that also has a lot to do with how the leader approaches failure. So does the leader panic? Do they start blaming other people? Or do they take it on the chin and say, fine, this happened, we weren't ready for it. Let's just pick up the pieces and move on. And finally, a great leader is not a dictator. So they have leadership, people want to follow them, and it's not like I don't have a choice but to say what this guy does and preserve my job, therefore let me just do it. So that's not an ideal climate.
Yeah, there's I think Saurabh made a great comment here, and it says, in my experience, lack of empathy is not necessarily an individual trait. At times it comes with the way the organization cascades its values to mid-management and below. And I definitely believe, I mean, there's if it's not set, if the environment is not set from the top to where you have a safe environment, it's that lack of empathy doesn't happen. And I think it does need leadership. It starts with leadership. What do you think, Lisa?
Yeah, that I was going to comment about that too. I was glad that Ralph brought that up, and that there are lots of different ways to demonstrate empathy. And Matthew points out the Herb Brooks, example from 1980 around multiple employment laws being violated. But there is also a lot of room to have behavioral variety within a team that may look really dysfunctional from the outside, but that the internal cohesiveness is really, really strong. And it's because they have built that climate or that culture. And I really appreciate, Sumit, what you're saying about the inclusion, not just in terms of, oh, what do you think, but actually the inclusion in upholding the collective responsibility for creating that climate, and having the inclusion in how we want it to be. So I have a lot of examples in my work of creating team culture consciously with the entire team, rather than the leader just defining the norms or the rules or the values. Inside of a larger organization, that can get really tricky if there's a lot of political dynamics where rules are defined by things that are just unstated and have been historically done a certain way. But when you've got to this remote environment, I think it opens up a lot of new opportunity this way, because you don't have necessarily we used to ask the question, where does the culture go when the people leave the building? And it's a really interesting question for us to be posing right now, because most of them have left the building, and yet there is still cultural elements around, especially around teams, that are really, really important to cultivate. They just take a different skill set, and that's been pointed out in the chat as well, that you have to have a facilitator skill set to build a remote team, and it is going to look a little bit different, but these principles are the same.
Yeah. Another thing that I was on a 15.5 webinar yesterday about employee burnout, and they were talking about that right now there's over 60% of employees out there feel like they're just burnt out right now, just be doing due to all the pressures and unrest and so forth, and the difficulties of doing their job in this new environment and not being enabled properly by the company. So I think it's super important for managers to understand that the amount of stress, and have empathy that the amount of what our employees and workforce are going through at this time, and find ways to relieve that as much as possible. I mean, we talked about this in previous sessions, I believe, as far as burnout, and I know you're a big expert on this, Sumit, about making the job, thinking about redesigning the job, or giving a break in those responsibilities, or certain responsibilities, releveling the role. A lot of different techniques there, but I think that's a big piece of what leaders can do to show their empathy in these situations.
Yeah, and this is coming out in the chat a little bit too, around the culture being a part of both the implicit and the explicit, so a lot of the core values are stated one way: respect, community, accountability, and quality were 4 core values of a company that I worked with recently. And for those of you who might have been on last week's forum, we talked about the example of the woman, Sabine, who was on, talking about how the president took like 2 weeks after everyone else was sent home in New York City to declare work from home is okay. There was an implicit cultural belief that our performance as a company is more important than your well-being. And they felt that. People in the organization were contacting me and asking what to do about it. And so the implicit will come almost always kind of win out in terms if it is in conflict with the explicit stated value. And I think that's another piece of the cultural importance of, in a team, really making those assumptions explicit and having a leader who knows how to do that really well, whether it's through storyboarding techniques, whether it's through involvement and engagement techniques that have you working on a Google Doc together, but that you're, allowing people to speak up and say, I think that we haven't, really tested our beliefs around whether performance is more important than people's well-being, from the example that I just gave. I'm pretty sure you're trying to move on here, Sumit. We had a lot of good dialogue happening in the chat, but
I think we've had some great points discussed here, and my favorite one, Lisa, is the behavioral variety that you spoke about. So that's definitely something to implement, something to figure out. But I think overall we can agree on this slide that the way to create a great climate starts with listening. So unless a leader listens to what other people have to say, they're not going to do any of what we've spoken about. And creating a great work culture, or being a talent magnet, which is what every company wants to do, it sounds fairly simple. So there are only a few points here on the slide, but it's one of the toughest things to do ever. And as we know, the reason why we've got a magnet image up there is because magnets have 2 poles. You get it wrong, instead of attracting people, you'll actually drive them the other way. Right. So step 1, great work policies. You can go the complete extreme and be like Netflix, where they've got a 1-line expense policy that says act in Netflix's best interests. So that's their expense policy. There's no auditing, there's no complex approval matrix and stuff like that. And people feel empowered, people feel responsible, that yes, the organization has entrusted me with a lot of responsibility, I must live up to it. But even without policing people, you can create a lot of friendly policies, things like talent mobility. People are looking for diverse experiences, why not give it to them? So even now, most people feel it's easier to get variety in your job outside the organization than to ask somebody to redesign or re-level your job within. And a great work policy would help you in retaining that kind of talent. Stress, of course, is increasing. Does the organization involve some kind of stress management? And we're not talking about little flyers hidden away in restrooms saying, if you're stressed, call this number, and we've got a plan for you. So stress management on the job, do you actually practice what you preach? When you say that you're allowing people to take a step back and focus on other priorities during the pandemic, do you mean it, or is that just your stick to whack people who you think are taking a step back and say, you took a step back, you'll be the first ones to lose your jobs? And there are some big corporations doing that as we speak. So to the outside world, on all possible social platforms and media, they're saying we're encouraging our people to step back and to focus on home and family during the pandemic. The internal factor that they're considering is who takes a step back and who's going to get labeled as an underperformer when the performance cycle happens. So that's plain hypocrisy.
Yeah, it's exactly what we were just talking about. Sam's talking in the chat about these statistics around 61% of employees are burned out on the job, and 31% report extremely high levels of stress at work. And so one of the questions that raises for me, and what you're talking about, Sumit, is what's the cause of all the stress? So we were just talking about, you know, the leader who comes with emotional intelligence, who shows caring, and kind of how rare that is in my experience. And of course, I'm working inside organizations that are intentional about cultural change. So I'm going to see more of that, but it really does beg that question. What is the cause of all this stress in the workplace? Do you have
And
thoughts
that's a
on
great,
that?
absolutely. So I've got very strong opinions on this one, Lisa. If I, as an employee, come up and say that I'm stressed, the next thing you do as my employer is hand me that flyer and say, you need counseling, go talk to a counselor. Or you say, I think you should attend mindfulness training. Or you'll have a list of prescriptions, 10 prescriptions that put the onus on me and say that you are to blame for your stress, rather than saying, this is what the organization can do, or what do you think is causing the stress? How can I help you with it? So again, listening is crucial. Simply throwing things at the employee and saying, we've got great infrastructure for people who are stressed. Stop stressing people out. You will not even need the infrastructure.
Right.
So
Find out what
listen
the
to them,
cause
listen to
is.
what they
Right.
need.
Yeah,
So it
absolutely.
annoys me a lot when I see organizations investing in counselors and doing a lot of stuff. So yes, it's important, but it's more important to listen to people, see the signs of stress and address them before an employee ends up with burnout or with anxiety.
And I think, as you point out, the conversation really is what matters. So I may feel, and Brian's talking about this is something I was just thinking of, as a lot of that is about the uncertainty that creates stress. And I will use sometimes this very simple example of if you're sitting on an airplane and the airplane has left the gate, but it isn't taking off. And there is no communication, right? And and 15 minutes goes by, 30 minutes goes by, 40 minutes goes by, and there's nothing is said about why we're sitting here. That creates its own form of stress. And organizations repeat those cycles over and over again with how they lead and manage changes and whatever the plan is, or don't communicate. So I think that's right, Sumit, that there is a real incumbency of communicating first with the understanding that stress is sort of its own pandemic in the workplace today, and that what we have to do is just give people the ear, you know, to talk a little bit about it, and then find out whether there are resources that are needed, or really is it just something that we're throwing at it, rather than coming to, it could be just a very simple solution. I don't know what's expected of me, or I'm having a really hard time with managing my home life and I need a quiet space to work, or, you know, solving those kind of problems that are causing the stress, rather than just assuming that it's the employee's emotional or mental state that's the problem.
Absolutely agreed. And in addition to managing stress, organizations need to make work more purposeful, tell people what's the meaning of all the midnight oil that you're burning and why we're doing this. And finally, work-life integration. So especially with the pandemic, our workplaces have entered our homes. And on this call itself, I mean, I'm on this call in my daughter's nursery. That's why you see the bright colors and decorations behind me. So the organization has to be sensitive to uh, the workplace and the home life being integrated for one, and making accommodations to make sure that if an employee has to step out or step away, that should be acceptable. So that's the bare minimum we can do right now, and help people in managing work, managing life. And that's why I'm not even talking about work-life balance. I'm talking about work-life integration here. Um,
More and more important.
Absolutely. And on the opposite side, I've got something called pay to quit. So no matter what you do, you can't engage every single person. Sometimes it's just good to um, let people go. And in fact, pay to quit is a great program that Amazon has, which they kind of copied from a company they acquired. The company was called Zappos.
Mhm.
And pay to quit basically says that if you're working in Amazon's fulfillment centers, you start off with a balance of $2,000. At the end of the first year, if you decide to quit, apart from your regular whatever dues are accumulated, you'll get $2,000, and the amount keeps on increasing every year, and it's capped at 5,000. So by the end of the third year, if you decide to leave, you will get 5,000 extra dollars, and that's a decent amount of money for people who work in the fulfillment centers. So that's their way of saying that if money is really important, take it and leave it. So
Yeah.
that's how you can build a stronger culture. Most important factor, and again, it's a sports analogy. The reason I'm dressed in a sports jersey as well is to just underscore that point. The name on the front, much more important than the name on the back. So engagement and building a cohesive team. Um, you cannot simply, as an employee, you can't simply throw everything back at a leader and say that you are responsible to engage me. I can't simply be sitting here and saying, I choose to be disengaged. It's your responsibility to do something out of the park and engage me. No. As an employee, I need to recognize that I'm playing for a team. What am I contributing? I was recruited, I was hired to do a job. Am I doing it? Am I staying true to my purpose or not? And I think we can all do with remembering this. Um, and of course, in case you haven't watched the movie, I would strongly recommend it. I think it's got a lot of lessons on cohesion and absolutely beautiful concepts on how to build a great team.
What's the movie? I didn't catch it.
The movie's called Miracle, and it's
Miracle. Oh, right. The hockey. Yes.
the ice hockey movie. Yeah.
Movie. Yeah. Amazing movie and story.
Great, yeah. So
Absolutely, yeah.
I'll have to take a look at it. So anyway, thanks, Sumit. I know that we went through a lot of content. It was a lot of great conversation. I just want to, before we move on to Erin's slide, I just want to make sure everybody knows that at the end of our discussion today, I'm going to show a little bit about a method of understanding your employees a little bit better, understanding it, so we can better engage with them, have conversations with them. And I'll show you a couple slides out of the TMA method, but that's going to be a free gift of those attending today. So stay tuned.
Right. Well, I certainly understand the stress and anxiety as a business leader and a business owner. So thank you. Addressing cohesive teams and engagement has been vital. So I am super excited to have another dialogue with my dear colleague, Dr. Erin Greilick, who again was one of our initial speakers. And her topic is about ready, get set, reopen. And oh my goodness, I've been through this. Our malls are just now opening in my locations. One was last Thursday, next one's next Monday. It has been quite a challenge. So thank you, Erin. Your timely topic is so spot on. So welcome, Erin. And you're mute.
Unmute myself. Okay. I think I have my screen shared. Am I doing that successfully?
Yep, just want to put it in presentation view.
There we go.
Cool.
Okay. So let me see if I can move this up. There we are. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Erin Greilick, and I am the owner of Core Consulting and Coaching. And I am thrilled to be here. Thank you again, Shar, Sam, and Lisa for the opportunity to come back. And this time, talk about reopening. It is a mixed bag of feelings, I think, that everybody is experiencing. And so how can we more effectively navigate the reopening of life? So the reality of it is we experiencing this pandemic has influenced every aspect of our lives. Not only work, but we have had stay-at-home orders for anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks or longer. Financially, there has been an extreme impact, not only on businesses, but families. There is panic when you walked into the grocery stores and there was no toilet paper. The first thing you think of is, oh my gosh, am I not going to have the basic necessities of life? So all of these have brought us to a point of feeling burnt out, feeling stressed, feeling exhausted, and that we still are not at the end of it. And leaders, you hold a special place because not only are you dealing with this personally, as well as being part of a family that's coping with this, but you also have a team at work that needs you to be present for them as well. So what I really wanted to do was help leaders think through the way in which they could more effectively navigate how to actually reopen their businesses. Now, the impact for small businesses, at least, which I would absolutely guess is in a lot of ways mirroring what's happening to larger businesses, is that revenue has drastically decreased. And you can see that there's an over 75% decrease in close to 60% of small businesses. So how are they going to reopen and recoup, hopefully, some of that lost revenue? The other thing that they were finding for small businesses is that a lot of them were fearing having to close down anywhere from the 1 month to 3 to 5 month period. Now, this survey was done between end of March and the beginning of April. So what we're doing is right now brushing up against that 5 month period. So hopefully businesses can have a strong chance to reopen in a healthy way. And that's what I hope we can talk about today.
Right. Well, I've experienced all of this. All of our payments stopped. So we essentially, everything was halted. All of our revenue was halted because we can't do genetic testing. We weren't ready to do mobile testing at that time, and we didn't feel it was relevant. And then we were going through the PPP process, which is also extremely confusing and stressful, but you can only qualify for that once. And so it's very scary. And, you know, it's not even, I personally was dealing with stress because it's not even just my career, it's my staff, it's my employees. So, so absolutely vital. This is so important.
Thank you. And so how did you go about doing the mobile transition? What was that like for you and your organization?
Well, what we did is we started looking at, since we're Rocky Mountain Health Advocates, we realized that perhaps genetic testing being our core business, although we can continue that, it's not really favored to do door-to-door with genetic testing because of all the regulatory aspects. So we started looking at many different virtual opportunities like affordable healthcare and other health-related and healthy employer type concepts. So which required me to be, and my team to be extremely innovative and really think out of the box, because I think that virtual work is now being more accepted in our community. But I would say prior to that, we weren't really thinking about all this extra transition. So we really had to change our strategy.
Yeah, that's a perfect demonstration of the ways in which small businesses have learned to pivot and pivot quickly. And I agree. There was such a surprise. A colleague of mine and I recently did a research project asking people what they felt like from work when they were working from home. And what we found was overall people were surprised with the level of productivity that they were able to reach. And the big watch out was actually making sure that we were helping employees at home keep that line from blurring between work and life. Because what was happening is people were feeling like they were losing control of their time management and that everything was kind of moving in and out, working late hours. So that has a bigger consequence because you don't have that clear division between when I'm at work and when I'm at home.
Right. And what we experienced is as I was exploring all these new virtual health system type of opportunities, I mistakenly was leaning on some of my star employees to really help me with that new direction, which also seemed somewhat chaotic, and we weren't 100% clear. So I had to think about, okay, are they technically on the clock? Am I having them work late night? Am I leaning on one person more than the other? I was dealing with some people just being completely disengaged. I mean, so yeah, it was a very tough time, particularly March, April. It was at the end of March and April. It got really stressful.
Yes, I think that was the peak of us figuring out if we can do this. And then coming into April, I think we were figuring that, okay, I think we have a good plan. And what you're mentioning is perfectly aligned with where I want to go next, which is our decision making right now is critical, especially for small businesses and leaders who are wanting to hold their teams together. What we are faced with is really making the best decisions possible for the team and the organization. So what neuroscience says about decision making is that we have two tendencies that we rely on when we make decisions. Now, the key here is that once we make decisions, and we tend to make them quickly, we tend not to want to entertain alternative solutions. So we have to be aware of the way in which our brain is functioning so that we can hopefully intercede in ways that will help us make the good decisions that we want to make for our team and ourselves and the organization we work with. So first of all is pattern recognition. So pattern recognition talks about us going back into our experiences and trying to pull forward what we did in those previous experiences to apply to our current situation. Now, there is no one on this planet that has been through a pandemic like we are going through. So the first caution that we have to take is not being overly presumptive about how you can relate previous experiences and bring them into real life solutions that will be effective in our current circumstance. The other is emotion. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would say, well, you were about to say it emotionally. I mean, that was, waking up at 3 a.m, stressed, worried about what we're going to do. And then if you have a business partner that's like, hey, I'm not going to worry about it. It's going to be fine. Everything's going to go back to normal. And you're like, no, it's not going back to normal. Yeah, absolutely identifying those patterns of behavior and then realizing we may need to expand our business and grow into a very different aspect of healthcare, but we can't just be picking random things that don't make sense with our business strategy just because we think it's going to be an easy revenue option.
Yes, there's a huge amount of discipline right now because you do want to pivot, but at the same time, you don't want to dilute your brand or your purpose of your organization. So yes, being very disciplined in making sure that you are not trying to jump to conclusions based off of situations that really are not closely related enough to help you be informed about what to do today. The second is emotional tagging, and this is something that we all have experienced. There are people in our lives that we really, really love and other people that we really don't care for. And so when that person is associated with a decision, one person that we don't really care for, those are the times where our decision making might be flawed. So making sure that you have some way to check that it's not your emotional reaction that's driving a poor decision because of how you feel. So I'll give you an example. A lot of leaders up until today have really been saying work from home can't work. Well, at this point, I would caution any leader saying to their workforce that work from home can't work. Unless you are in a high touch system like a restaurant or something along those lines, if you have kind of a white collar business, it is dangerous for you to turn around and tell your employees that you can no longer work from home because I don't believe it works. There's just too much evidence right now. So that's a decision where you have an emotional tag about working from home and not trusting that people will do the right thing, that could lead you down a decision path that will not be beneficial for your team or your organization.
Yeah, I think of my experience as a HR business partner and working with large healthcare systems, and we would have entire departments of like 100 employees, which we had very expensive rent costs for housing those employees. And I remember the conversations with the management team about this telework and the fact that the time, trust, and can they be productive? Can they get the job done? You know, are they going to be in their pajamas? And oh, is the logistics of the work environment correct? And it was constantly discussed for years and years and years. Now I don't work with that healthcare system anymore, but I would assume they're all like, yep, I think that patient billing positions can work at home. You know?
I hope.
Yeah.
I sincerely hope.
We find out.
So in this time, the reason why I wanted to specifically kind of get into some of the details around our decision-making process and the neuroscience behind it is because what I want to be able to offer leaders is one way to help to combat mistakes that could be brought about by overusing pattern recognition or emotional tagging. And so the way in which we can do that is through having a process that we are going to follow so that we can be very intentional and purposeful about what it is that we're going to be considering.
And wouldn't you say that particularly at the executive level, that team cohesion is so important together to have the leadership awareness that we are dealing with emotional and pattern, all of that, and to be aware that we need to be very careful how we move forward as a team and show the company that we're cohesive and unified, right?
Yes. And understanding that everyone is going to be at their own point along the spectrum of feeling comfortable to the people who are saying, you know, I just am not there yet. Mm-hmm. And so the more that the leadership team can really allow people the voice and the space to be honest about where they are, the more successful they will be in reopening. Which brings us to that strategic plan. So there are 4 different areas that every leader should be focusing on. The first is building a strategic plan. The second is to build efficiencies in the area of systems and process. Those are 2. And then the last is to build people capability. So Shar, thank you so much for letting me smoothly move into this first one, which is strategic planning.
Yeah.
Now, it might seem counterintuitive why I have this sweet little girl as my picture for employees. But that's because your employees are really representing everybody that they have at home. Now, there are a lot of schools that are still not sure about how they're going to open in the fall. So there are summer camps that have been closed. There are all sorts of activities that kids would be doing right now that they don't have access to. And consequently, parents have kids at home in a way that they haven't before. So that's one reality that we have to understand, that employees don't have childcare, and therefore me coming into the office is not going to be the way that it was before the pandemic hit. The other thing is that
we really need to think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that employees are really focused on taking care of their basic needs, their families, their children, how they're going to get fed, how are we going to be able to maintain our health care, you know, and as a leader, you have to think beyond, oh, I just expect my employee to get to work on time and I expect XYZ outcomes. I mean, you have to think way beyond that in your strategic planning.
Absolutely. And really, this is the point at which I don't think you can go past the employees. If your employees are not feeling good, there is no point of making a plan to open, because these are the faces that your customers are meeting every single day. So if they're not feeling comfortable being in the workplace, or that they cannot manage it because they have home responsibilities that are not being taken care of while they are away, then there is no way that they are going to interact with your customers the way that you want to and the way that they want to as well. So it is critically important for you to spend the time understanding what your employees are needing right now, because when you offer that to them, they will be able to offer that to your customers. Now, one way you can do this is through survey, because what it allows is everyone can have a voice and that you have an opportunity for anonymity. So if somebody is uncomfortable about talking about the reasons why they're not ready to come back to work, at least they have an avenue for them to be able to express that. So
Right.
just to be aware as a leader.
Yeah, and I would say a lot of big employers rely on surveys a lot, but I also know that if the culture is not a trusting culture about surveys, that can be difficult. So it's like you're almost behind the 8 ball, trying to initiate new survey processes where people feel comfortable really sharing what's truly on their mind and what, like, for example, Lisa talked about in her last example, making decisions and making it too late and not getting the feedback and communicating with your staff. If you have to handle that so carefully during this time.
Yes. And third-party people providing that survey option is one way around that, so that you can assure people that we don't have access to the data. It is all being filtered through a third party. So that's one way around. And even if you have a highly trusting culture, it still might be a nice added cushion for people that you do use an outside source. But very good point.
Yeah.
So once you figured out where your employees are and what accommodations they might need, the next thing that you can turn your focus to is your customers. Now, I came across a study that was looking at the relationship between when government was closing our businesses and the consumer behavior. And what they found was that even when government was slow to shut the community down and issue stay-at-home orders, consumers had already stopped buying. So the takeaway from this is that consumers dictate when things are closing and when things are reopening. So the critical point here is that you have to be aware not only about your employees and their feelings about getting back to work, but you also have to really critically think about where your customers are too, because they will not return if they do not feel safe in starting to repatronize your business.
That is absolutely correct. I mean, there was actually some confusion about the wearing of masks, and it is required all employees wear masks, but at the same time, it's kind of confusing. For example, if the organization or the mall, for example, is making grand announcements saying, we encourage you to wear masks, they're completely optional. It's interesting because we've already experienced that. It's like people walking around seeing, well, that store has protective equipment, that store does not. That does not make me feel safe and feel that I really value that company or that brand. And Andre Bloom just talked about here in the chat, he's talking about not only the psychological safety and like what you're saying, it's the customer safety and knowing that we are truly here to take care of their health.
Yes.
So important.
And I will say myself as a customer, I am aware when there are organizations that have posted that suggested kind of wearing of masks. And my first thought, honestly, is what are you saying to your employees? What you're saying to your employees is money from my customers is more important than your comfort and safety within your working environment. So yeah. I would caution people to push too fast to try and reopen and be everything to your customers, because it starts to compromise other people who are further along that spectrum and not feeling as comfortable being out and about and at your business.
Well, yeah, and we've had some conversations about when you wear the mask, to take an opportunity to go in the restroom in the back and take a breather break, so that you're not constantly breathing in your mask all day long. And then we've been talking about, okay, what kind of sanitizers are going to truly be effective to really kill the COVID, and how are we going to model that to our customers, and what's our protocols? I mean, it takes a lot to strategically think about all of those plannings.
It absolutely does. And the funny thing is that we haven't even gotten to that portion, because we first need to take inventory of our employees and customers. The third step that we have to take care of is our leadership. And Sumit was talking about the importance of leadership in the way that people feel about their teams. And there's absolutely no difference here. You want people to feel like they are in a space where you are putting their safety ahead of everything else, so that they then feel like they can bring their best. Because of that psychological safety, if I do not feel safe, I am not bringing all of who I am and all the gifts and talents that I have. So the first thing for leaders is to make sure that you are controlling the message that you are delivering. So if you are confident that you can safely bring everybody back, then communicate that. Say how you're going to be doing that. Make sure that you're setting the tone that you want to have in your workplace, which is, we are going to put safety first. We want to welcome back customers as quickly as possible. So what is it that you want your employees to be focusing on? And that then becomes your message. The other piece, Char, like you were talking about, is alignment. You have to make sure that if you have a team of leaders, that everyone is on the same page, so that you have an opportunity for everyone to ask the questions that they have, know where their resources are, and have a say in what it is that is going on. That also gives you a connection back to your employees and customers. One of the conversations that was coming up in the chat area when Sumit was talking was the idea that, you know, this is still a transition for us. So it's not like it's stable, and now that, you know, I know where my employees are, I know for the rest of the time where my employees are, or my customers for that matter. So how can you really continue to stay connected with your employees and customers? And one of the best ways you can do that is to make sure everyone in a leadership position is on the same page and talking with employees and customers on a regular basis.
Right, and you know, about that leadership, we have a situation where we have a director who's accountable for the other managers, and I think I had to really acknowledge, you know, we're opening up new locations, we're getting new signage, we're focused on sanitizing our locations and everything. We're hiring about 10 new employees within the next 2 weeks. I had to step back and acknowledge this particular leader, absolutely love her, and she's a superstar, but I have to think about, I can't overwhelm her. Just because she's the director doesn't mean she has to be in charge of all the operational activities. And we had to step back and look at everyone's talents and say, how can we help you delegate? It's like, maybe somebody is not real good at sales, but they might be good at recruiting, you know, and realigning their position and their talents and their competencies to really help that leader be able to be the strongest they can be and lead the team forward.
You make a great point, because what you're doing is acknowledging the fact that even the leadership role has changed because of what has happened regarding the pandemic and bringing people back. So making sure that you are connected to your leaders to support them. I am working with a CEO right now who is saying that she has to do so much more counseling than she ever has before. So that is the reality, that we are still bringing all of the emotional stress that we're experiencing from the pandemic into work. And on top of that, not knowing what work is going to look like. So how can we take into account all of those additional focuses and energy, you know, consumers that are going to have to be acknowledged for some amount of time?
Absolutely. And I was just noticing here in the chat, listening is so critical right now. And at Lisa just mentioned getting feedback. It's not about getting feedback. It's truly listening to the point of view of your leaders and your teams.
Yes. And that's where I feel surveys can be really, really powerful, because they do offer opportunity to everyone to provide feedback. Mm-hmm. So what ways can you make sure that that feedback loop is established so it's two-way and very effective in helping you make good decisions, right? That's going to be a terrific way for you to make sure that you can feel confident in the decision being the right one for your team and for your organization. And then finally, so we've already gone through 3 different steps. Finally, we're ready to actually talk about the operational changes that need to be made in order for you to be able to open. So what is it going to take in order for you to meet Department of Health criteria? And how is it that it's going to change the way in which your work responsibilities are going to increase in some ways, right? If you have to clean once an hour, That's going to take some time. So how can you help your organization figure out the ways in which it's going to integrate those additional steps into their day-to-day activities?
Exactly.
Okay, so that was your strategic plan. And it really starts with your people, next with your customers, then making sure that you are providing the leadership message that you intend to, and then finally getting to what your operations are going to look like. The next piece is to look at your efficiencies. There are two spaces in which we can look at efficiencies. The first one is systems. Now, system upgrades, system automation, all of those are really, really painful experiences that organizations usually put off because of how much it will take from the organization in order to do that upgrade or automation. Now, we have some downtime. We're a little bit slower right now. We might not want to be slower, but let's take advantage of the fact that we have much more space in our employees' days, in our days, to manage something along the lines of an automation or upgrade. Some of the ways in which we can upgrade too can also help our customers and employees feel safer. So anytime you walk into a store and need to pay for something, do I have to exchange something with the person who's checking me out? Or can I do it all myself and not have to hand back and forth anything with the other person? And so is there opportunity for you to do an upgrade that not only makes your business more effective, but also helps to encourage your customers to feel like you have them in mind and you are setting up systems to help them feel safer in your business?
Yeah, we've been going through that as well as we're introducing a new scanner for health, your internal health. Initially, we're talking about, should we accept cash for this test? I mean, we could charge like $25 for it. Ultimately, we decided, you know, we're going to give this out for free. And then use email if anybody's interested in supplements or whatever the outcomes are. We don't necessarily need to have product or have hand exchange of cash in the store. We can do all that electronically. So it's completely revamped our way of thinking and how to keep that social distancing and take care of our employees and our customers at the same time. So absolutely.
And that really puts you in, that's you putting yourself in your customer's shoes. Mm-hmm. So your sensitivity to, you know, I know that there are some customers out there that would really like to know this information, but they might not be ready to actually be that close with somebody. Mm-hmm. So how can I problem solve for them so that I can meet them where they're at? And that's where businesses, I think, really still have to continue to pivot to figure out ways in which you can meet customers where they're at.
Absolutely.
So another way that you can build efficiencies is around process. And core work processes that have, you know, kind of the bloodline of your organization are the ones that are most important for you to focus on, because those are going to need to be as efficient as possible so that you can share best practices, you can have a consistent outcome at the end of your work process. And a lot of people are having to add in sanitation or how to wear masks, cleaning after clients if you're doing something like a hair salon, or working in a restaurant. You have to clean everything that people have been in when you're looking at a table or a booth. How can you help your employees get ahead of the game by thinking through the way in which you're going to build a core work process that helps that be smoother for them to be able to execute?
Yeah, we're even adding a whole new sanitizing system, and we may even make that a product with our company. But yeah, it's fascinating because, you know, in a restaurant, it has to take time to dry in between, and you know, and I've seen often in restaurants they just squirt, and then slap the thing on there, but that has to change now. It's not the same way.
Yes, right. And is there a way that you can keep your employees from doing excess work, right? Because sometimes you can think, well, is that one clean? Is that one not? So I went to a restaurant for breakfast this week, And they actually had a system where they had this little blue card that says this table is clean, so that they let their employees know this is all ready to go. You don't have to worry about this. So how can you be proactive in helping team members figure out the way in which they can manage all of the extra activities that they are going to be responsible for?
Well, and then think about all the buffets, that the companies that had buffets that can't offer that anymore. So now we have to have staff literally not having self-feeding processes, right? So that's a huge change for some companies.
Yes. The amount of pivot that everybody is going through right now is just a testament to the resilience of human beings.
Correct.
So it's quite remarkable. The last thing that I would want any leader to focus on as they are preparing to reopen is building capability. There is a huge talent pool out there right now. Great people. So there are two things to keep in mind. One, you could get great talent, and two, you could lose great talent, because there are other people out there that are looking to hire just like Shar. Shar's looking for 10 fantastic people to join her team. So these are the ways, and this is actually very much paralleling with what Sumit was talking about when it comes to taking care of your people and allowing them opportunities that encourage their engagement. So first thing is, do you know who your high potentials are? And if you have identified your high potentials, do you know what they want to do, where they want to go, how you can invest in them so that they get to that destination that they have 3 to 5 years out? And it might not necessarily mean that they will be with you for 3 to 5 years, but you sure will get a lot of their best for the time that they are with you because of their level of engagement being higher. So how can you invest in your top employees, one for the purpose of retention and two for the purpose of performance? The second is, yes, go ahead.
On that topic, so I'm a talent management strategist, right? But
Yeah.
I was relying on traditional performance management processes and traditional canned interview questions and performance evaluation forms. As this time, I'm so happy to work with Comp Team, because now I've completely transformed my mindset around competencies and capabilities and talents. And so when I had my restart meeting with my staff on my grand reopening day, we started off with, what is the capabilities that we need? What is the competencies that we need? What is our strengths? And the nature of the conversation was very, very different than the traditional mindset. And then also with our interviewing, we now are completely turning all of our interviewing practices upside down. It's not going to be anything the same, as well as our coaching and mentoring. And it's interesting because I didn't get that mindset shift until the last couple of months.
And what that's going to do is translate directly to your employees. They are going to see the thoughtful changes that you are making to invest in them. Mm-hmm. And every one of us has higher expectations of organizations today than we ever had before, to allow us to kind of bring our best to the workplace. And a lot of that has to do with feeling like we have autonomy to do what we do best. And we also have purpose. And finally, that we have challenge to raise our skill set to be the best that it can be. And your process that you're talking about in developing people really, really feeds into that.
And I got a real positive reaction, by the way. They were very pleased. My employees said, wow, this is so different. And I said, we're going to be one of the best, most innovative, progressive employers, and we are going to be the example. And they were like, this is awesome.
Yes, this is what I want to hear. I want to be an employee here.
Yeah, you want to work for us.
Exactly. One of the other things that a lot of healthcare experts have been talking about, and I hate to have to say it, is a second wave. That's probably about the last thing anyone wants to live through. However, I would not want to be left flat-footed if a second wave was to happen. So this is our time to identify those critical roles within our business and to cross-train. Make sure that if somebody happens to fall ill and is out for 2 weeks, that you have a way to cover the work that they usually would be taking care of if they weren't sick. So one of the things right now, as we are slowly ramping back up, is making sure that you know what critical roles you have and cross-train for all of them.
Correct. Absolutely.
The last thing that I want to share, which is very much in line with what Sumit was talking about, is organizations have historically been terrible at preparing their leaders and managers for the role. And so the rate that of people who are in management and supervisory positions who have never received any type of training or skill development in that space is 65%. So this is a great time. We were talking about leadership. We were talking about the importance of alignment. Right now is when you want the strongest capability possible because of the number of things that our managers are going to be dealing with. Sumit was talking about emotional intelligence. We want opportunity for our leaders to strengthen that muscle within themselves because we need that. We're still dealing with employees going through a lot in their personal life and also transitioning back to work. So how can we really help those frontline leaders support our team so that they can do the best that they can every day, even given all of the craziness that we're facing right now? Okay, so just really quickly, I am, again, the owner of Core Consulting and Coaching, and really what I do is I work with executive teams and helping them become stronger and more effective in the role that they have in leading their organizations. And I also support strategic transformations that organizations would like to undertake. And I am a data nerd. So I was mentioning surveys, that's probably revealing my data nerd side, and would be happy to help any leader if they are looking for data and being able to gather that through a safe third party. I could absolutely help with that too. So
well, I have to say, like I told you before, your presentation is so spot on. I mean, everything, I mean, I could basically, like, as you notice, I'm experiencing everything you talked about right now. So that thought partnership is, even if you are a pro HR person, OD person, or it's CEO or CFO or operations leader, it's helpful to have a third party thought partner and to really help you strategically think through this, so that you're not going through emotional decision making and falling into those patterns that is, you know, eventually going to impact your business and sustainability. So this is great.
yes. Yeah, and thank you very much. And if it's not a consultant, then at least somebody that you know that has a really kind of stable perspective, that doesn't have skin in the game, that can really be your thought partner and push you to go beyond any kind of errors that we're making regarding pattern recognition or that emotional tagging.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I will stop my screen share. Give me 1 second.
Great. Well, we want to talk about a few things, and I think Sam, we were going to talk a little bit about the TMA method.
Yeah. So thanks a lot for that, Erin. I mean, I think that both when we were talking about Sumit's presentation and yours, I mean, it's critical. It's just so critical for us to understand our employees really well and understand what their talents are and how they can contribute and what's the best way to communicate with them, what's the best way to train them and our managers for success in the future. And so I want to show you a quick tool that will help with that. And it's called the TMA method. And we're fortunate to have Andre Bloom on with us right now. He's one of the founders of this particular tool. But what it does is I'll give you some screenshots of some of the output that comes from a tool like this. First of all, once a person takes the assessment, it helps us understand a little bit of their description of their personality and things as far as their overall talents, what they are, what their preferences are. And the good thing, the one thing to understand with when we talk about competencies is there's no good and bad here. I mean, there may be those that are more suitable for certain positions, but when we're looking at our employees, we want to focus on their strengths and really drive and pay attention to those, because that's where all their performances are. This is where they love to be in their work life. So it's important for us to know what their strengths are. And then also there may be things that such as, you know, what are the places that we can develop or we can make stronger in that individual. And the one thing that this assessment does is it'll point out what their preferred learning style is, and so that we can focus on those types of learning experiences that are going to have the greatest impact for those employees. In addition,
I was going to say that I've been so fortunate that I was gifted this opportunity, because like I said, this changed my entire way of how I was leading my teams and assessing their competencies, capabilities, talents, learning styles, and also myself. So this has been a fantastic tool. What a great gift.
Yeah. The other thing is of course, I mean, is the coaching piece. We were talking about development and knowing how to develop certain competencies of our employees. And here, the tool allows you to focus on specific competencies that you're trying to develop, and it'll give you guidance on how to coach that employee to greater success. And so anyway, a lot of fun stuff here, very interesting to take. So I invite you to send me an email, and I'll send you out a free assessment, and you'll have access to that assessment for 1 year on the portal. And you can use that for your own needs or whatever. Or if you're interested in running this for your team, we'd love to help you with that as well.
Yeah, it's a great tool. It's awesome when you actually operationalize it and actually utilize it. The nature of your conversations with your employees is very, very different from experience. This is great. And basically anyone on our comp team is able to assist you with, you know, getting access to this tool and understanding it and operationalizing it. So this is great.
Great. And I believe that everybody has taken a look at the polling that we have available, and it looks like we have people have already signed up for plenty of these free offerings. But and do you happen to see that poll? Is that up right now?
I don't see it on my screen. Can you pull that up?
Let's see. I think that's actually, well, I think it's actually running right now. There it shows that attendees are reviewing the questions. But so if everybody is seeing that poll, if you see that poll on the screen, just shoot me a note saying that you see it on the in the chat box. If not, I think that you have an option to click on the below banner to bring that up. And if you put your information in there, just tell us what you would like to do. Right. There's basically a consultation with Shar, Lisa, Sumit, or Erin that's available in addition to the free TMA assessment.
So with that, I would say each of us have some specialties. One, the free assessment for 1 year portal access is huge. I mean, taking advantage of that, these can cost a lot of money. So this assessment tool is awesome. My specialty is relative to one, not only being a business owner, founder, and a chief HR officer and applying all these talent management practices. That's my firsthand experience. Lisa is a culture change expert, and has worked in transforming cultures, particularly right now with all the change and the you know, what's happening in our nation right now with some unrest. Obviously, Sam is an expert in compensation analytics, has an entire compensation analytics team around total rewards and recognition, which is also transforming and changing. And Erin, did you want to give us a brief update what your services are?
Yes, so in the area of executive team development, I am an executive coach as well as a team coach. I facilitate offsites so that teams can have those conversations that they might not have yet figured out how to have them, to make sure that they are healthy and aligned and getting what it is that needs to be talked about, discussed. And when it comes to kind of system transformations, those are really me helping an organization figure out what's at the root of a challenge that they have not been able to solve. There are too many times where leaders are feeling like all they're doing is fighting fires and not being able to focus on the most important. And so I can help leaders figure out, okay, how are you going to get that clarity and how are you going to regain control so you can get back to doing what's most important, which is building a healthy team and healthy organization.
Fantastic. What a gift from you to help. And then Sumit, you're a talent management strategist and change expert. Could you give us a summary of your 15 minutes that you can offer?
Absolutely. Thanks, Shar. So my specialty is putting the employee at the center using human-centered design principles to make sure that your management practices and systems are in place, starting from the organization structure and whether it's aligned to your organizational goals, to your performance measures, the kind of culture and the performance climate that you're building in the organization, and what kind of policies and processes are supporting. So all the, I like to call it the hardware and the software of HR, to make sure that employees are able to bring their whole selves and their best selves to work. In addition, I will also, so it kind of does tie in with what I spoke about. I also do a lot of work around diversity and inclusion and making sure that the voices that we spoke about earlier are heard and acted upon.
Excellent. Well, yes, that's also a very relevant topic. So thank you all. These are great conversations. So I'm just going to go over some quick logistics to wrap up and closing, and then we're going to open up for any additional questions or comments. Again, this recording will be on comteam.net. We highly encourage you to look at this recording. Also, you're going to find all those prior recordings, and I'd love for you to listen to Erin's first presentation on the very first day at our HR forum, and you'll see how we've come along and made this more of a forum style. So please listen to those. Please share that. LinkedIn with us. Take a look at everything we're sharing with you and take advantage of our free gifts. I mean, this is really a giving to our community and our business leaders and to really support and help you. And there's so many other gifts that if you listen to the recording, you're going to hear it. So if you're like making dinner and you're trying to multitask and take care of the kiddos and take care of everything else, put your little laptop on the counter and listen to some of these prior comp team recordings. And share that information. So
hey Shar, can I interrupt for just a second? Speaking of gifts, I actually have a handout that I would love to pass over to Sam so that he can put that up on the website too, that will help a leader kind of walk through exactly what we're talking about today in a checklist form that has some great questions that they could be asking themselves so that they could move through the process themselves using that handout.
Wow, I mean, talk about a value to everyone, even just to have all those lists and everything. So thank you, Erin, so much for your generosity on that. So in closing, we have a few more minutes. Is there, from the team, is there any final comments, questions, things that came up in the chat? And Sam, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was about to say we're fortunate enough to have Andre Bloom on, and he's like I mentioned, he's the founder of the TMA method, and so Andre, feel free to join us if you'd like. I think that I upgraded you to panelist, so if you want to share your video or if you have something to say, let us just jump on in.
And as Andre's pulling up, I am so honored that I'm going to have my own TMA interview tomorrow with Andre. I'm so honored, and everybody can have an opportunity to have that type of assessment. So thank you, Andre, for really helping us transform. But he's not able to really join us, it looks like, but I would just tell you, I mean, taking advantage of his resources and tools, he's been extremely generous in training all of us and how to utilize the TMA assessment to really coach and mentor, and then apply each of our own expertise around culture and talent management and compensation and rewards. So we are blessed to be able to have this tool, to share it with you and follow up with each of you individually if you're interested. So thank you, Andre.
You know, one thing that I put in the chat here is just some guidance from the U.S. Chamber that was released a couple weeks ago. And some of these are pretty straightforward, of course, as far as reopening strategies for business. One is converting those shared spaces. I think they were talking about more like, I think the first idea was they're going to put people back in cubicles in their own little space. That's just does not sound inspiring. So,
Not to me.
yeah.
I had employees that did not like those cubicles in the first place because they
Yeah,
didn't get the sunlight.
I mean, when
But
you think about it, what's the difference that you know you might as well be working at home? You know, if you're, I was at a client, a new client a couple years back, and I walked into their office, and I sat down, and everybody was in cubes, and I went to this one place, and in the one side of the floor there was a big office building. And they said, oh, well, you need to meet with so and so. And I go, okay, well, where's that person? She goes, oh, I don't know, I have to look it up. And they punched it up, and this is a person they talk to daily, and they punched it up on the employee directory. And then, oh, he's on the same floor, he's down over there. And we actually just walked across the floor, and it was the first time these people ever saw each other face to face. I was like, oh, what is this?
that's almost like texting your family in the house, you know, when you're in your bedroom and they're in the living room. You're like,
Yeah.
you're just,
That's crazy.
well, I'm thinking it'd be great to have a staff meeting outdoors, you know, have an outdoor healthy staff meeting with healthy food.
Yeah. Well, just talking about other workplaces, there is another workplace I have. It's a technology company out of Iowa, actually, and they have a beautiful building. And one of their areas is they just have an outdoor eatery where it's just completely, and it's covered, and the sides can come down to for bad weather or for air conditioning or whatever, but they can have all their meetings outside in that space now. They just reconverted it as a workspace. So there's things you can do.
Yeah, I call it the healthy employer. I mean, I was working on healthy employer strategies before this. The healthy employer strategies are going to be blown out of the water. More innovative, more thoughtful. Staff should have input. Be a healthy employer. Be a role model. That's great.
I love that name, a healthy employer. I think that is very key, not only the safety part, but it also brings in kind of that wellness too of spaces that have light, like you were saying, you know, people having challenges when they feel like they're cut off from the world. So yeah, that's a great phrase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like affordable healthcare is what we're looking at. How can we finally be an employer of choice by offering free healthcare? You know, all these things that we were not really looking at before, you know? How do we make sure our employees are hydrated, you know?
Yes.
Right.
I have to work from you.
Unfortunately, I think that we are out of time.
Okay.
I just noticed that we're like 2 minutes over the
Yep, I think we're down to the end here. So thank you so much, everybody. We appreciate it. Thank you, Sumit, and thank you so much, Erin, for returning. So we appreciate it. We appreciate all of you. Reach out to us and have a great rest of your week. And thank you.
Right.
Bye, everybody.
Here's everyone.
Bye. Bye. How about this? Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.